I never thought one evening could completely upend my entire life, but here I am, telling you this story, and still trying to process everything. It all began on a Friday night when the rain was relentless, hammering against the windows in a way that made me feel trapped even before I set foot inside that house. I had been invited, or rather, reluctantly dragged by my cousin, to her friend's family gathering. She promised it would be fun, harmless, nothing dramatic. I wish I had listened to my gut, because the moment I walked into that place, the air felt different, like it was charged with some unspoken tension I wasn't supposed to notice, yet I couldn't help but feel it pressing against me. The house was enormous, the kind that makes you feel insignificant the second you step inside, with chandeliers that reflected the flickering light of countless candles and polished wooden floors that seemed to echo every step I took. I didn't know anyone there except my cousin, who was already blending into the crowd with ease, her laughter ringing above the soft classical music playing in the background. I, on the other hand, stuck awkwardly near the hallway, sipping my drink and pretending I was invisible, because somehow, that felt safer. And then she appeared. I don't even know how to describe her properly. It's not just that she was stunning, though she was. There was something commanding, something almost predatory about the way she looked at people, sizing them up as if she could see through every lie and insecurity they carried. Her eyes landed on me in a way that made my stomach twist. "You're new here," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "I don't think we've met properly. Come, let's talk." I wanted to say no. I wanted to retreat into the shadows and pretend I didn't exist. But something in her tone and unspoken power, a subtle insistence made me follow her deeper into the house, past the living room, into a smaller, dimly lit area that smelled faintly of roses and something else I couldn't place. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair. Her presence was overwhelming, magnetic, and I felt my heart racing in a way that wasn't normal for me. She studied me for a long moment, tilting her head, smiling just slightly, the kind of smile that makes you feel exposed even if you've done nothing wrong. "You seem unsure of yourself," she said finally. I laughed nervously, saying something about being shy, about not knowing many people, but she didn't seem to care about my words. She was listening for something else. Something deeper. Then she leaned closer and said words I would never forget. "If you want to stay here, be my daughter." At first, I thought it was a joke, some weird game. My mind raced. Be her daughter? What did that even mean? I chuckled awkwardly, trying to mask my confusion, but her gaze didn't waver. "I'm serious," she said. Her tone left no room for refusal. "If you truly want to be part of this, if you want to belong, you must become someone else. Someone new. Someone beautiful." My stomach sank. The words sounded like a trap, yet there was something hypnotic in them. Something that made me want to obey, even without understanding why. And that's how it began. At first, it was subtle. She asked me to wear her gloves, just for a moment, and I laughed nervously, thinking it was harmless. But as soon as I put them on, I felt different. My hands felt softer, my movements lighter. She smiled knowingly, as if she could see the shift in me that I couldn't yet understand. "You see," she whispered, "you're already becoming her. You just need to let it out." I didn't know what she meant, but I nodded anyway, afraid to say no, afraid to disappoint her, afraid to disrupt the strange, intoxicating control she had over me. Over the next few hours, the requests became more specific. A scarf here, a blouse there. At first, it was just clothes, just textures and colors, but soon she began guiding me in ways I had never imagined. She told me to walk differently, to sit differently, to speak in softer tones, to smile in a way that would charm anyone who looked at me. Each instruction felt like a test, a challenge, but also a strange liberation. I was terrified, yes, but I was also captivated. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone was paying attention to who I could be, not just who I was supposed to be. By midnight, I was standing in front of a mirror in her bedroom, completely transformed. The clothes she had chosen for me clung in all the right places, the makeup she insisted I try highlighted features I never knew I had, and my hair, styled and brushed by her meticulous hands, fell perfectly around my shoulders. I barely recognized myself. And yet, there was a part of me that felt alive in a way I hadn't before. She watched me from the doorway, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. "This is you," she said. "Or at least, the version of you that deserves to stay here." It wasn't just about appearance. It was about becoming someone else entirely. She had a way of speaking that made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Every instruction, every gentle command, felt like peeling back layers I didn't know I had. The person staring back at me in the mirror wasn't just wearing her clothes. I could feel her influence in every posture, every glance, every subtle movement. And yet, it felt natural. Almost inevitable. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay. I wanted to see how far this could go. The next day, she introduced me to everyone else as her daughter. My heart pounded in my chest as people smiled, nodded, and complimented me. I could feel the shift in their perception, the way their eyes softened when they looked at me, the way their words carried warmth I had never experienced. It was intoxicating, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. I kept waiting for someone to call me out, to see through the illusion, but no one did. I was living a lie, yes, but it was a lie that made me feel alive, seen, and wanted. And the truth was, I didn't want to go back. But of course, nothing that transforms you so completely comes without its shadows. There were moments, brief and fleeting, when I would catch a glimpse of myself in a mirror or a window and panic. Who was I? What had I become? The reflection staring back wasn't entirely me, and yet it was. There were nights when I would lie awake, questioning whether this path was a liberation or a trap. And then she would appear, always calm, always in control, and remind me with a soft touch or a whispered word that I was exactly where I needed to be. That I was chosen. That I was becoming something more than myself. As weeks passed, the transformation deepened. I learned the art of conversation, the subtle gestures that made people trust me instantly. I learned to laugh in ways that were melodic and disarming, to walk with a grace that turned heads without effort. I learned to accept the power in my own presence, the way my voice could command attention and comfort simultaneously. Every time I faltered, she was there, guiding me, shaping me, molding me. And every time, I realized I wanted to keep learning, wanted to keep changing, wanted to stay exactly where I was. And yet, the tension never fully disappeared. I was constantly aware that my old self, the one I had left behind, was still somewhere inside me, buried beneath layers of silk, mascara, and carefully practiced smiles. There were moments when it would slip through, a fleeting surge of panic or confusion, and I would catch her watching me with a knowing smile, as if she had been waiting for that exact moment. She never shamed me. She never pushed me. She simply reminded me, always with the same words, "If you want to stay here, be my daughter." And somehow, that simple sentence held a weight that was both terrifying and liberating. It was a command, yes, but also an invitation. A chance to become someone I had never imagined I could be. By the time the first month had passed, I realized that my old life, the one I had clung to, seemed distant, almost unreal. I had embraced this new identity fully, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because in the reflection of her eyes, in the way she guided me, I had discovered parts of myself I didn't even know existed. Courage, vulnerability, grace, confidence, a strange kind of joy that came from daring to be someone new. And even though the path had been frightening, even though I had been terrified every step of the way, I couldn't imagine going back. Because becoming her daughter had made me whole in ways I never thought possible. The next few weeks were surreal. Each morning, I woke to a version of myself I barely recognized, yet strangely, it felt right. Her presence was a constant shadow over my life, guiding me, shaping me, pulling me into a version of femininity I had never imagined I could inhabit. I still remember the first time I wore heels under her supervision. I thought it would be simple, a mere detail, but it was torture and revelation all at once. My legs trembled, my balance faltered, but she never allowed frustration or embarrassment to overwhelm me. "Feel your body," she whispered, "trust it. You are learning to move as she would, as you want to be." The words made no sense at first, but the moment I began to sway, to walk with intention, I felt a flicker of something profound, a sense of ownership over my own transformation. She was meticulous. Every gesture, every expression, every inflection of my voice became part of her curriculum. I had to laugh in a way that felt natural yet captivating, speak softly yet command attention, and even learn subtle glances that could disarm or charm anyone in the room. It wasn't just performance, it became instinct. There were nights I would practice in front of the mirror alone, adjusting my posture, my smile, my hands, until I could see a trace of the person I was becoming staring back at me. Sometimes it was exhilarating. Sometimes it terrified me. And always, through it all, she was watching, always present in a way that made me simultaneously feel guided and exposed. One evening, after another long day of lessons in poise and presence, she brought me to a room I hadn't yet seen. The walls were lined with mirrors from floor to ceiling. "Look at yourself," she said softly, almost reverently. "This is who you are now. Not who you were, not who you think you might be. This is her, the daughter you chose to become." I stepped closer, my reflection multiplying infinitely, each angle a different facet of myself. The person staring back wasn't me, not the me I had known, but it was undeniably alive, undeniably confident, undeniably feminine in a way that felt terrifying and intoxicating all at once. I wanted to look away, to run, to escape, but I couldn't. And she smiled, knowing I wouldn't. The challenge wasn't just physical or aesthetic. She tested me emotionally, socially, psychologically. Every time I interacted with her friends, her family, or even strangers she introduced me to, she would whisper guidance, subtle tips on tone, expression, and posture. She molded not only my appearance but the very essence of my social presence. People began to respond to me differently, warmer, gentler, more attentive. I started to notice how my words carried more weight, how a simple smile could diffuse tension or invite conversation. It was intoxicating. I felt power in this new identity, but it was a fragile power, tethered entirely to her approval and guidance. And that dependence both thrilled and terrified me. At the same time, fragments of my old life began to clash with this new existence. I would see an old photo of myself, or catch a glimpse of my reflection before applying her chosen style, and panic would surge like electricity through my veins. Who was I really? Which parts of me were authentic, and which had been carefully sculpted under her hand? I would wrestle with myself late at night, sometimes weeping silently, wondering if I had lost too much, or if I had gained something extraordinary. And yet, in those moments of doubt, she would appear, always calm, always patient, and remind me of her mantra: "If you want to stay here, be my daughter." It was simple, yet it carried weight. Obedience, yes, but also invitation, trust, and acceptance. It made me question whether my resistance was fear or merely a remnant of old habits I no longer needed. The first major turning point came when she asked me to attend a formal event as her daughter. My heart sank. This was more than just clothes or gestures, it was stepping fully into the public eye, fully embodying the persona I had been shaping in private. I felt exposed, vulnerable, terrified of judgment or ridicule. But she didn't let me retreat. She dressed me with care, teaching me every fold, every angle, every subtle accent that would make me move and speak like her daughter. By the time we arrived, I was unrecognizable to anyone who had known me before. I was poised, radiant, and commanding in ways I never thought possible. And as we entered the room, she leaned close and whispered, "This is who you are now. Own it." People stared. I felt their gazes, their curiosity, their admiration. My voice carried in soft, confident tones as I introduced myself, laughing at the right moments, nodding gracefully, adjusting my posture with every word. I was aware of every movement, every sound, every nuance, yet I felt strangely natural. And through it all, her eyes were on me, approving, watching, guiding. That night, I realized something profound. The daughter I had become was not a mask, not a lie. She was a version of me I hadn't dared to explore before, a self I had kept hidden, restrained by fear or convention. And now, under her guidance, it was alive, undeniable, and free. Yet, the deeper I went, the more complicated my feelings became. I was exhilarated, yes, but also haunted by guilt and uncertainty. What if I had gone too far? What if this new identity, this carefully crafted version of myself, replaced me entirely? There were nights I would stare into the mirror, watching the reflection of a person I barely recognized, wondering if she was truly me or simply a creation I had been molded into. The tension between fear and desire was constant, electric, impossible to ignore. And each time I faltered, each time panic surged, she was there, gentle, insistent, reminding me that transformation was not about perfection, it was about courage, acceptance, and choice. Over time, her influence seeped into every part of my life. Friends I had once relied on didn't recognize me, colleagues were captivated by my newfound confidence, and strangers treated me with a mix of curiosity and respect I had never experienced. I began to revel in the subtle power I now possessed, the way my presence could shift energy in a room, the way a glance or a phrase could command attention without effort. It was intoxicating, yet grounding at the same time, a paradox I struggled to comprehend. And always, through every encounter, every challenge, every victory, she was there, her eyes, her voice, her gentle insistence, guiding me, shaping me, reminding me of the choice I had made, to stay, to transform, to become her daughter. And then came the moment that changed everything again. She handed me a small box, wrapped in delicate paper, and said nothing as I opened it. Inside were items I had never dared to imagine wearing on my own: silk dresses, delicate jewelry, carefully chosen accessories that complemented every aspect of the persona I had been developing. I felt a thrill of fear and excitement as I touched each piece, understanding that these were not mere objects, they were symbols of trust, markers of the path I had chosen, tools for becoming the person I had always feared I could never be. And when I looked up at her, she simply smiled, the kind of smile that makes you feel exposed, seen, and cherished all at once. "If you want to stay here, be my daughter," she repeated, her voice soft, insistent, final. And in that moment, I realized I had already crossed a line from which there was no turning back. By the end of that week, I was no longer the same person who had walked into that house drenched from the rain. I was a new self, crafted through meticulous guidance, rigorous practice, and the subtle, insistent influence of someone who saw what I could be before I dared to imagine it myself. I had learned courage, grace, poise, and the quiet power of presence. And yet, the tension between my old self and this new identity remained, a constant hum beneath the surface, a reminder that transformation is never simple, never easy, and never without cost. But for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to belong not just to a place, but to a version of myself I had never allowed to exist before. And all of it came down to those words, repeated like a mantra, etched into the core of my being: "If you want to stay here, be my daughter." The days that followed were unlike anything I had ever experienced. I had settled into a rhythm, but each moment was still charged with a strange, thrilling tension. She had begun to push me further, not in ways that felt cruel, but in ways that tested the very core of who I thought I was. She wanted to see if I could embody her daughter in every circumstance, if I could move through the world with confidence and authenticity while still carrying the weight of my old self hidden beneath the surface. And I discovered, sometimes to my amazement and other times to my terror, that I was capable of more than I ever imagined. It started with small, seemingly mundane challenges. She would ask me to choose my own outfit for a gathering, carefully observing every choice I made: the colors, the style, the way I carried myself in the mirror as I examined my reflection. "This is about self-expression," she said softly, "but it's also about courage. Do you trust yourself?" I hesitated. The thought of making mistakes terrified me. Yet as I began experimenting, combining pieces in ways I never would have dared before, I felt an unexpected surge of pride. The reflection staring back at me was no longer just her vision, it was becoming mine too. And then came the public test. She arranged a small gathering, a mix of friends, colleagues, and strangers I barely knew. The kind of event where any misstep would be noticed, whispered about, judged. My heart raced as I dressed under her watchful eye. Every fold of fabric, every stroke of makeup, every tilt of my head was scrutinized, corrected, perfected. When I finally stepped into the room, I realized I had transformed beyond recognition. The way people looked at me, spoke to me, even hesitated before interrupting me, it was different. Respectful, attentive, almost reverent. I was no longer just a guest. I was her daughter, fully realized in the eyes of everyone around me. But with this new identity came a deep, unshakable vulnerability. Each compliment, each nod of approval, was a reminder of how much I had relied on her guidance, how dependent I had become. I feared exposure, the moment when someone might see through the carefully constructed facade and discover the frightened, unsure boy I had once been lurking beneath the silken polish. At night, I would lie awake, the tension coiling in my chest like a living thing, wondering if I was truly embracing my new self or simply hiding from my fears in an elaborate disguise. It was during one of those nights that the confrontation happened. I had been practicing in the mirror, trying to perfect a subtle gesture, when she appeared silently behind me. "You're afraid," she said, almost accusingly. I tried to deny it, laughed nervously, but she shook her head. "No, you are. And it's okay. But if you want to truly stay here, to truly belong, you cannot let fear rule you. You must embrace who you are becoming, not just the reflection you show others." Her words struck me like lightning. I realized she was not merely teaching me to look like someone else, she was teaching me to own myself in a way I never had. The next challenge was perhaps the hardest yet. She asked me to attend a formal dinner entirely on my own, to interact with influential people she had invited without her immediate guidance. My chest tightened. I had never faced the world alone in this form, and the idea terrified me. But she reassured me with a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Trust yourself. Trust that you are capable. And remember, if you want to stay here, be my daughter. That choice is yours, always." That evening was a revelation. I entered the room, each step measured yet effortless, each smile calculated yet genuine. People responded to me differently, listened, engaged, even sought my opinions. And for the first time, I realized that the daughter I had become was not just a reflection of her vision, but a living, breathing version of myself that I could carry anywhere. I wasn't performing anymore. I was existing fully in this new identity, and it was powerful, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. Yet the transformation was not without emotional cost. There were nights I would catch glimpses of my old self in the mirror, moments when the fear and doubt surged back like a tide, and I would panic, afraid that all of this was a deception I could not sustain. Sometimes I would cry silently, feeling lost between the boy I had been and the daughter I was becoming. And each time, she would appear, calm and unwavering, whispering that familiar mantra, "If you want to stay here, be my daughter." It was both command and comfort, insistence and invitation, and slowly I began to understand its deeper meaning. She was teaching me not just to become someone else, but to embrace the parts of myself I had hidden away, to own them, and to move forward without fear. The weeks turned into months, and my transformation deepened. Every gesture, every nuance, every subtle inflection of my voice became second nature. I had learned to navigate social situations with grace and confidence, to command attention without arrogance, to inspire curiosity and admiration with a simple look or movement. And yet, beneath all of this, a quiet tension remained, the delicate balance between my old self and the new, between fear and courage, between doubt and acceptance. Then came the ultimate test. She invited me to a weekend retreat, a gathering of her closest friends and family, where I would be fully immersed in the life of her daughter. There was no room for hesitation or retreat. For 3 days, I would live entirely as her creation, observed constantly, guided subtly, and tested in every conceivable way. I felt my heart hammer in my chest as I accepted. This was no longer a game or experiment. This was living, fully and irrevocably, in a new reality. The retreat was transformative beyond anything I could have imagined. Every interaction, every activity, every conversation became a lesson. I learned to navigate conflict with grace, to offer support without seeking approval, to smile even when fear threatened to break me. And through it all, she was there not as a teacher, not as a supervisor, but as a presence, a guide, a silent anchor ensuring I did not falter completely. By the end of the weekend, I had realized something extraordinary. The daughter I had become was not a shadow of myself, but an expansion, a version of me that was courageous, resilient, and unafraid. And yet, even in this newfound confidence, I understood the fragility of it. One misstep, one moment of hesitation, one lapse into old fears could unravel everything. The stakes were high, the tension constant, and the emotional intensity nearly overwhelming. But I also realized that this was precisely the point, that transformation is never comfortable, never easy, never safe. It is a leap into the unknown, a surrender to possibility, and a test of courage and resilience. By the time I returned from the retreat, I was no longer merely her pupil. I was her daughter in every sense that mattered. I had learned not just how to look, speak, and move like her vision of femininity, but how to inhabit it fully, authentically, courageously. And every time I caught my reflection, every time I heard her voice reminding me of my choice, I felt a strange, intoxicating clarity. This was not a mask, not a performance, not a temporary experiment. This was who I had chosen to be, and it was beautiful, terrifying, and liberating all at once. The final stage of my journey began subtly, almost imperceptibly. I had grown accustomed to the rhythm of her world, the cadence of lessons, the constant guidance, yet something had shifted. The fear that had haunted me at the edges of every decision, the fear of exposure, the fear of failing her expectations, had begun to fade. In its place was a quiet confidence, a calm awareness that I could navigate this new identity with authenticity and strength. But the challenge was now internal, subtler, and infinitely more profound. Could I truly accept myself as her daughter without reservation, without hesitation, without the lingering shadows of the boy I once was? It started with a simple evening, one that on the surface seemed mundane. We were sitting together in the living room, soft light spilling from the lamps, a gentle warmth in the air. She had handed me a journal, her eyes fixed on mine with a weightless intensity that made me shiver. "Write," she instructed. "Write everything you feel. Who you were, who you are, who you want to become." I hesitated, the pen trembling in my hand, because I feared that committing my transformation to paper might make it irreversible. But as the ink flowed, a rush of clarity overtook me. Every fear, every triumph, every nuance of my journey spilled onto the pages. I realized that the daughter I had become was not merely a reflection of her influence, it was a living, breathing embodiment of choices I had made, fears I had conquered, and truths I had discovered. That night marked the first time I truly saw myself without judgment, without doubt, without the constricting lens of my old insecurities. The girl in the mirror, the daughter she had guided me to be, was fully, undeniably me. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating, a fusion of vulnerability and power that left me breathless. She watched quietly as I closed the journal, her eyes glimmering with a satisfaction I couldn't quite read. Then she spoke, her words soft yet absolute. "If you want to stay here, be my daughter. And now, more than ever, you are ready to choose fully, without hesitation." The weeks that followed were a dance of freedom and tension. Every interaction, every social encounter, every reflection became an opportunity to inhabit this identity fully. I learned to trust myself, to act without second-guessing, to embrace the subtle power I now possessed. I was aware of the fragility of this world, the way a single lapse could unravel the illusion, but I no longer feared it. Because I realized that the daughter I had become was not a mask, not a costume, not a temporary experiment. She was a part of me in expansion, a liberation, a revelation of courage I had never dared to explore. Then came the moment of ultimate test and affirmation. She invited me to a formal gathering, one that would bring together all of her friends, family, and influential acquaintances. It was the culmination of everything I had learned, a public affirmation of the transformation I had undergone. My heart raced as I prepared, dressing with meticulous care, practicing gestures and expressions until they felt natural yet commanding. When I entered the room, the energy shifted. Conversations paused, eyes turned, and I felt the full weight of presence I now carried effortlessly. People smiled, engaged, and interacted with me in a way that was at once validating and exhilarating. I was not pretending. I was existing fully, courageously, beautifully. Throughout the evening, her eyes never left me. There was no critique, no correction, only a quiet acknowledgement, a wordless affirmation that I had crossed every threshold, met every challenge, and embraced every aspect of this identity. And I realized something profound. The journey was never about becoming someone else, it was about discovering who I had always been, hidden beneath layers of doubt, fear, and societal expectation. She had guided me, yes, but I had chosen every step, every gesture, every smile, every subtle inflection. I had chosen to stay, to transform, to be her daughter, and in doing so, I had found myself. Later that night, when the house was quiet and the lights dimmed, she led me to a room lined with mirrors, the same room where I had first confronted my reflection. "Look at yourself," she said. "Not as you were, not as I made you, but as you are now. Do you see her?" I looked, and for the first time, I truly saw. The daughter I had become was radiant, confident, and unmistakably real. She was me, fully realized, fully accepted, fully embraced. A rush of emotion overcame me: relief, joy, pride, and an almost overwhelming sense of belonging. I turned to her, tears brimming in my eyes. I am her," I whispered. "I am your daughter, fully. And I want to stay." She smiled, the kind of smile that carries warmth, power, and unconditional acceptance. "Then stay," she said simply, her hand brushing mine. "Stay as the person you've chosen to be. Stay as the daughter you were always meant to become." From that moment onward, my life shifted irrevocably. I moved through the world with a grace and confidence I had never known, my interactions charged with authenticity and subtle power. The lessons she had imparted, the guidance, the challenges, the subtle insistence of her mantra, "If you want to stay here, be my daughter," remained with me, not as commands, but as a foundation, a constant reminder of the courage and choice that had brought me here. I discovered joy in subtle gestures, power in presence, and freedom in authenticity. My old fears, though never entirely gone, had lost their grip. The daughter I had become was not an imitation, not a reflection, not a shadow of someone else. She was fully, undeniably me. And in embracing that truth, I realized the ultimate lesson of my journey. Transformation is not about losing yourself, but about finding the parts of yourself you were too afraid to reveal, and having the courage to make them real. The house that had once felt imposing and intimidating now felt like home, not because of its size or grandeur, but because it was the place where I had discovered who I truly was. She had given me the gift of guidance, insight, and patience, but it was my choice, my courage, and my willingness to embrace change that allowed me to stay. And as I stood in the mirror, fully seeing myself for the first time, I understood that her words were more than instruction. They were an invitation, a challenge, and ultimately, a revelation. If you want to belong, if you want to be seen, if you want to exist fully and without fear, then you must embrace who you are, in every nuance, every gesture, every choice. And so I did. I chose to stay. I chose to become her daughter. I chose to find myself in the reflection of someone else's vision, only to realize that the vision had always existed within me. And in that choice, I discovered freedom, courage, and a sense of self I had never known. I had been transformed, not by coercion or magic, but by guidance, choice, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. And now, I walk through the world fully realized, wholly seen, and entirely alive, carrying with me the lesson that will stay forever etched into my soul. If you want to stay here, be my daughter.